questions before you get started? Anything before you get started in your minds? All right. Let me summarize a bit where we were last week and help bridge us to our class this week. So far, we've discussed the rule of capture. And the basis of the rule of capture is that a person who is the first to make contact with some wild animal, whether that's a mortal wounding or putting a harpoon through it or physically obtaining it, right? However the law defines capture, if you're the first to do it, you prevail. But a basic element of the rule of capture is that you're mixing your labor with some object. And the court sort of bounces back between how labor theory applies in this context. Do you reward the hunter who actually was able to get to it? Or do you reward the hunter who put more work into it but perhaps missed it? And we have a lot of cases on this. All right. I want to start off. Oh, by the way, here's the link for the chat so you can all see it. Here's the link for today's class notes. I want to do a poll question if I can. Short answer, and this is a review from the INS versus AP case. I want you to tell me, just in a sentence, what is quasi-property? What is quasi-property?
Mine is not letting me answer. It's saying no response. That's my answer.
Okay, let's see what's going on here. Is anyone able to answer? Some people are. I'm getting answers in, so some people are able to do it. I'm not sure what's going on. Sorry. I got 10 people put answers in.
I also have a different problem.
What's your problem?
I only know what the question is because you said it, but the question itself is not showing up in my iClicker. So I was able to input a response, but only because you verbalized the question.
Well, that part doesn't always work, so we'll have to just go with me reading the question. All right, I got about 14 people. How many of you are not able to see the question? That's not good. Only one of you. Okay, well, we'll make do. All right, who's next up in the queue? And even if you're not able to answer the question, that's fine. I'll figure out later what's not working. It's not important.
I believe I am.
Is that Lacey?
Yes,
all right,
sir.
Lacey, help me out here. What is quasi-property?
I believe they talked about it being like the idea. It's not really real property, but it's the idea that you can own something that's not really tangible.
Okay. So you're saying that quasi-property is not tangible. Is that what you said?
Well, not physical. Maybe that's a better word.
Okay. So INSVAP is about news, right?
Yes.
Is news tangible or physical, to use your words?
Well, a newspaper would be, but the news that they're discussing is no.
Can I put the news in my pocket?
No.
Can I like crumple it up and throw it away?
The actual news? No.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Lacey. Okay. So Lacey suggests that quasi-property is some sort of property that's not physical, that's not tangible, right? Is that Sandra here?
Yes.
Sandra, how do you define quasi-property? Help us out here.
I would kind of thinking the same sort of like not like.
What does quasi mean in general?
It's like.
What does quasi mean?
I'm not completely sure.
You remember that word from other classes? Quasi? From Civ Pro, maybe?
Kind of. Does not benefit the society as a whole.
No, that's not what it means. Victor, you hear Victor? Victor? You're in the classroom. Okay. Okay, so I promise I'll get this one. You know what? Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna pin you to the screen. That way I can get to this even quicker. Okay. Okay. Victor, go ahead. What is quasi property?
It is when it is. I was gonna have the same answers for that's why I'm trying to focus the but
What does quasi mean in general, Victor?
something that's not like really tangible, but
All right, let me help you out here. And actually, let's see, mute. Okay, that's actually pretty good. I think this is going to work for the semester. If it works for you. Alexandra, what's quasi mean?
From my understanding, it means like partial.
Ah, good. Almost, right? Good. See, someone said she began her answer saying like. I'm like, well, that's actually correct. It's like property, right? But then that you mean it was just sort of like a filler word, right? Quasi means almost property. It doesn't have all the attributes of property. It has some of the attributes of property. Okay, so it might not be physical, might not be tangible. Totally see. Garrett, you here? Yeah. That's actually really helpful with the waving. I appreciate that's actually very, very kind of you. So Garrett, let me ask you this question, please.
Yes, sir.
If I just pick up a newspaper and I read an article they really like, can I read out loud to the class and just read it to you? Am I allowed to do that?
Yes.
And I can get sued if I do, if I just read you an article that I really liked?
No, I don't think you can get sued for that.
Okay, so let me ask you another question, Garrett. What if, say, you're a competitor, right? You're the Houston Chronicle, right? And you pick up a copy of the New York Times and you have this article. It's like, yeah, this is a good article. Let me just copy it verbatim into my newspaper. Can you do that?
So you cannot copy it verbatim because then you're kind of getting into the intellectual property area of it. You can speak about it because speaking of the news is like a common property.
Is there a difference between Josh as a random person reading from a newspaper and Houston Chronicle copying the article for their own paper?
Yes, because the Chronicle is an institution and you have like the competition and those practices involved.
So you're saying property rights mean different things to different people. That's what you're getting at, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thanks for that, Garrett. Okay, put the classroom back on mute. All right, so this is an important point that I want you all to understand, right? Property is not the sort of absolute thing. There's no one definition of property. Property governs different types of relationships, right? Let's just say you rent an apartment, right? Your relationship with your landlord. So for 1 year, that apartment's yours. But after the year's up, it's not yours anymore, and someone else comes in there. If some random person comes off the street, you evict them, right? You kick them out. Property is about relationships of people to land, or people to an object, or people to something that's not even intangible, right? If I pick up a newspaper, I'm allowed to repeat the story. I'm a random person. If I'm a competitor under the law, I can't do that because there's unfair competition laws. There's no one definition of what property is, right? Property is very context specific, and property governs relationships between people and things. All right, everyone with me? Any questions so far? So let me ask the second poll question, which I hope you can see about 25 of you answer the first poll question. So something is off with a minority of you. because a lot of you were able to do it. So question number 2 is multiple choice. There is no right answer here. I just want to know your position. It's like a poll. Question number 2 is your body property? Is your body property? True or false? We're gonna spend some time this question. So just give this one some thought before you put an answer in, because it's there's a lot going on here. Okay. All right. I think David G. I'll call on you about 5 seconds. All right, David. Wow. This is so much different than the other class. This is a very different result than the other. Wow. Fascinating. All right, David, what's your position here? What'd you put? Is it property or not? A or B? You there, David? I see you're off mute, but I don't hear you. No, you're on mute, my friend. You're not on mute, but I can't hear you. Maybe unplug your headset for a minute. Yeah, very often people have their headsets plugged in. The mic never works. Yeah, go ahead.
So I actually went with B. I don't think it's property because I think we place a different value on like our body than a piece of land or a tennis ball or a newspaper. So I don't think it should be traded and sold or changing hands.
Well, what does it mean, David, for the body to be property? What does that even mean?
It would mean somebody could, potentially you or somebody else could exercise control over it. If like, with going into the case that we were supposed to read it, if you define something as property, you have those certain like bundle of rights that go with it.
Ah, this bundle of rights. What is this? What's this bundle of rights?
Different rights that pertain to different pieces of property.
All right.
Like ability to sell or.
All right. We'll do the bundle of rights on Wednesday. If it's not clicking, I promise I'll come back to it. All right. Thank you, David. Catherine, what'd you put here, Catherine?
I put true. That
okay, so we have one false and we have one false, we have one true. Okay, so tell me why you put true.
Well, I put true because in the sense that property is something you possess and have rights to, then your body should be something obviously in your possession, and you should be able to have the rights to do as you please with your body.
Is that what the law currently exists that you can do? You can put in or take out from your body whatever you want?
Well, like people, like blood plasma, or I don't know of any other examples.
Well, you can sell blood and sell plasma, right? Maybe you're in college towns. You know, every college town has a plasma center because college kids make money off of it. They sell their plasma. Sperm and eggs. You can sell sperm and eggs. Bone marrow, you cannot sell. What about kidneys, Catherine? You only have one. I mean, you have two kidneys. Do you think you should be able to sell a kidney?
Perhaps it depends on if it's for the benefits. I don't know. That's a hard question.
Taylor, what did you put here, Taylor? Taylor L. No Taylor L. Sarah.
She's in class.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay. You know what? How about let's try this. When I call on one of you to Okay, I'm sorry. I will get better at this. I promise. Okay, Taylor L, go ahead. You know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to highlight on my roster in yellow if you're in the classroom, and that way I'll know to, because I have my roster here. Okay, so Taylor L, go ahead. I'm sorry I didn't call on you.
I said true because the part of our reading that said both state and Fed statutes implicitly recognize property rights and body parts.
Okay. Are we only bound by what the federal law says? This is more of a broad question. Let me ask you, Taylor, let me ask you the same question I gave to Catherine a minute ago. Should people be allowed to sell kidneys? They have two. You can live with one. Should they be allowed to sell a kidney?
I don't know. It's a tough question. I mean, for me, I think a lot of it depends on like what your motivations are. But
Why should it matter?
No.
Why should your motivations matter?
if you're able to sell them, though, it's like going to, I guess, unfairly exploit people.
Well,
So
why is it necessarily exploitation? People sell lots of things. Sell your house, you sell your car. Why can't you sell your kidney?
because it's extremely valuable and everyone has one.
Yeah, but so what? People have lots of valuable things. But why is it different?
I'm not sure. I've never really thought about it.
I know you have. That's why I'm asking these questions. Sarah L, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead. Oh, you're in the classroom as well. Okay, good, perfect. I'm going to highlight you to my roster. What'd you put here?
I would say that it's your body's not property, because I feel like it's almost higher than property. Like,
Higher than property.
there's no doubt that someone else is going to be able to have my property right in my body. I would never give that or sell that to anyone.
All right, Miranda. I'm sorry, Sarah. I didn't interrupt you. Go ahead, please finish.
I think the kidney thing, I think you should be able to give your kidney, but you shouldn't be able to sell your kidney.
But what happens, Sarah? Let me ask you a follow-up question if I can, because you said something that I want to follow up on. You know, there's waiting lists in every state for kidneys, right? There's waiting lists in every state. People are dying on these waiting lists. What if people were given incentives, $10,000, $100,000, right? Whatever the dollar number is, to donate a kidney. You know, not everyone is so benevolent that they'll give it for free. And what if we're able to get rid of the waiting list and create enough supply that anyone who wants a kidney can get one, and we save lives daily? People are now living because we're able to put a dollar amount on a kidney. Does that change your mind?
No, I think if you could sell a kidney, then prostitution might be illegal.
Oh, that's my next question, Miranda. That actually was literally my next question. Miranda, you here, Miranda? Are you in the classroom as well? No, you're in Zoom land. Okay. Miranda, let me ask you the question then. Prostitution. That was the same. That's from Sarah, not from Josh. I didn't say it. That's Sarah. Should prostitution be legal?
I feel like the operations of it now, like with pimps and, you know, the horrible things that happen with it shouldn't be, but, you know, maybe if it was a better system, then.
Well, what if it was a regulated profession? In some European countries, sex work is actually a profession. They have unions. They actually, it's like, you know, you become a carpenter, you become a prostitute, right? It's a vocation. Should that be legal? Let's just say you can do it without risk of abuse.
I don't have a problem with it. I know there are a lot of people who would, based on moral reasons.
Well, what are those moral reasons? Maybe you don't agree with it, but maybe you can tell us what those reasons are.
I mean, a lot of the reason is because they don't think that sex should be sold.
Why not?
I feel like a lot of people have it on religious grounds.
Okay. Why should sex not be sold on religious grounds? That's what I'm looking for.
Because they think that sex should be in marriage only and should not be outside of a legal realm. Okay,
very good. Thank you, Miranda. Alexandra, waiting at prostitution. Should the state be able to tell a person they can't sell their body for sex?
I kind of agree with Miranda. I think that we as a country have a really hard time separating our religion from our laws and policies, and that a lot of the tabooness, that's not a word, I just made it up, but that comes from religion, and the law should probably, rather than prevent it from happening, regulate it, because it's going to happen regardless. It's happening all over the country, and I think regulating it to make it safer for women especially is a better approach to it, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Rachel, let me ask you, let me change direction a bit. Rachel, what about drugs? And let's not do like pot, let's do like heroin or opiates, like really bad stuff, right? Stuff that'll mess you up. Like that could be fatal. Should the state have an interest in banning heroin or fentanyl? You pick whatever drug you want.
Yeah, I think the state should have an interest. I don't know how large or small the interest should be. But I think with something that is fatal, definitely.
But why, if people want to put this dangerous substance in their body, why should the state be able to stop them from doing so?
I think it's hard to regulate people's free will in putting something in their body. There's a lot of things that could go around it. Like it's like regulating something a child does.
We're talking adults here. Forget children. These are adults. They make the age of consent. When you turn 21, you can buy heroin in your corner grocery.
Yeah, so I think even with adults too, it's hard to gauge the level of education around what they're doing to themselves. It's hard to gauge the social circumstances.
Sure. But my question is more basic. If you're, let's say you put A here, right, that you own your own body, or maybe put B, you don't own your own body. Why should the state be able to tell you what you can and can't put in your body, like a controlled substance?
I don't know if they should be able to tell you what you can and cannot put in your body. I think there's definitely an interest there of how much they can tell you, or the responsibility to spread education about what is out there, what you could be doing to yourself. But I'm not sure if how much that should be, like what level of responsibility they have.
All right. Alyssa, I see your hand was up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that the difference between something like maybe donating your kidney for a good cause, or even just the freedom to engage in prostitution without it being illegal, and then between that and drug use, is a lot of the drugs not only affect you, but they affect other people. So it's now moved from just something that affects an individual to something that affects a community. And once that step is involved, like for example, you don't want somebody on a drug that causes them to be extremely violent, or stuff like that. So once it moves from just the individual to a community related thing, I think that makes the difference.
Do you think prostitution can affect the community at large?
Sorry, what'd you say?
Can prostitution affect the community at large?
Yeah, in a lot of different ways, like deterrence. And I don't think that all drugs should be heavily regulated, but there are some that if a person intakes them can make them a serious danger.
Yeah, I picked fentanyl very deliberately. I went to the, I didn't say marijuana. That one's perhaps too easy.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Alyssa, for that. Let me do maybe one more person. Jeanette, you here?
Yes, hello.
Okay. Oh, I hear a puppy too. All right, Jeanette.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. We're all together apart, as they say. Let's talk about suicide for a minute, right? Yeah. Does the state have the interest in preventing from taking your own life?
Does the state have an interest? Possibly.
Why?
Should they?
What's the basis of that interest? Why should the state have an interest? If a person wants to end their life, why should the state criminalize that act?
I don't think they should criminalize it.
But what is the state's interest to criminalize it, whether you agree with it or not?
Well, I think it's just because the person dies for possibly a reason that they shouldn't have died for.
Right, but let's
So if you-
let's say this is an assisted suicide case where a person is terminally ill, they have 6 months to live, and a doctor provides some treatment that will end the person's life painlessly.
So you're saying, like, what's the interest in the state in doing that?
Why
Like,
should the
it's not
state say no?
illegal?
You can't do that because why most states, and there are a couple of exceptions, but almost every state would make that a crime to give someone a course of treatment that would end their life.
I don't think they should.
I know that, but tell me what is the state? We're lawyers here, right? To argue positions you don't agree with. What would the state's interest be to have a ban on assisted suicide? Someone said it
Yes.
earlier.
To deter people from
Oh, there's
doing the same thing. We don't want the whole
yeah,
population to commit suicide, I guess.
yeah, but why not? That's my basic question. Why is the state opposed to suicide?
Well, if everybody kills themselves, then where's the need for me?
Sure. There's no people left, but let's just on a one-on-one. Why is the state interested in saving a life? The person doesn't want to be alive.
It's the moral thing to do.
That's where I'm headed. All right. Thank you for that, Jeanette. Okay. Very good.
You're welcome.
Right. So, we've been sort of tiptoeing around the issue about morality. I think someone said there was a strong connection between religion and law in this country. It's not just this country. Almost, every country in civilization, laws develop based on notions of morality, which are linked to religion. And I don't think you can talk about things like prostitution and suicide without talking about religion. You saw this in one of the opinion, I think, of Justice Arabian's concurrence in the Moore case. But how you answer these questions, I think, will be very closely linked to your own views of morality. The law doesn't provide all the answers, and there are certain first principles that people have to draw from to sort of wrestle with these tough questions. All right, I saw there were a bunch of hands up. I know I see Alyssa's hand. Anyone else? Maybe a first timer? Yeah, Michael, go ahead. I'll come to you a second, Alyssa.
No, I was just gonna comment on the suicide issue, and there's also a judicial economy factor there, is it not? I mean, when someone leaves behind their estate in a very abrupt fashion like that, the courts get clogged up.
Also, they have a will. People have a will. They don't. No. Maybe that's what the law says. If you want to commit suicide, you have to have a will.
Say again.
Sorry. Maybe the law says if you want to engage in assisted suicide, you must prepare a will in advance.
To prepare a will, you would still have to probate the will, would you not?
Yeah, but that works for anyone who's dead.
Yeah, but you're also controlling. You're taking more into your own hands. You've got insurance policies out there.
They settle all their affairs. I mean, all the things we dealt with. In other words, people who die suddenly are more likely to have these problems. People will die on a planned basis, right? If you're planning your death at a certain date, you can actually put all of your affairs into order. Versus, let's say you're hit by a bus and you have no will or anything else, it's more problem. But I like what you're thinking. Probate, good.
Yeah.
All right.
But also, just because something's legal or illegal in the eyes of the government doesn't mean it's what you would teach your family. You don't need government regulation to tell you how to live your life, do you?
I don't know. Alyssa, what's your question?
I was just going to say, I think it is possible to identify government interest in preventing suicide without talking about morality.
Okay, tell me.
Because a lot of people who are looking to commit suicide are generally not in a very good mental state. That brings into question things like capacity to consent to things like that. Like, it's like a circular thing, is this person in the right state of mind or capacity to consent to this doctor giving them this thing that would induce suicide? And so maybe the government interest is preventing people like doctors with bad intentions from taking advantage of people who they might be able to manipulate in a bad state of mind.
Okay, very good. I appreciate the consent questions. The the issue of informed consent is actually very difficult. So in many Scandinavian countries, they have assisted suicide. And in some states out west, they have assisted suicide. And they have various layers of review to ensure the person fully consented. And different people have to sign off on it. So there's less of a risk of perhaps, unfair advantage. Alexander, go ahead. Are you in the classroom or are you somewhere else? You in the classroom? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, because I didn't want there to be an echo.
Yeah, no, good idea.
So going back to general interest of those weird seeing myself. Going back to general interest about like how the government regulating suicide or drugs or anything like that, the government owns or like has an interest in serving its people. So if you are just letting your citizens just do whatever they want, we'll be quickly fall into like a lawless nation. So there's some things that we do want to regulate. Like we joke about selling your kidneys when you want to buy like a PS5, but for those reasons, we want to make sure that we can't just sell it willy-nilly.
All right, thanks, Alexander. Let me give you another anecdote if I can. I'm sure you all know Steve Jobs, who was the president of Apple for many years. He had liver cancer, a very, very, very dangerous form of cancer, and he needed a liver transplant. Now, a liver cannot be donated from a live person, right? Because if you lose your liver, you can't live. So you need to have it from a cadaver, right? It's a person who dies and donates his organs. So how did Steve Jobs get a liver? Every state has a waiting list for liver donations. And Steve Jobs basically purchased a home in all 50 states and went on 50 different waiting lists. Yeah. And the story gets even more shady. He apparently, he eventually got the liver from, I think it was Tennessee, if memory serves. And he basically let his doctor in Tennessee live in that house rent-free for a couple of years until he got the kidney. It was like a mansion, it's a nice house. So the fact is, people who have money are able to get kidneys because they can do, stuff like this. If there was actually a market where there was a price called $1,000, $5,000, whatever it is, and it was an open market where people could purchase these organs, it very likely will allow more people, not just super wealthy, to get them, right? People can go overseas and buy them in shady situations as well, which also raises other issues. People in third world countries selling their organs. If there was an actual marketplace, this is a long-standing debate that never seems to go anywhere. But I appreciate this is a very mature discussion we've had. So thank you for this. All right, any other questions before we jump on to the first case for today? No? All right, let's move on to Moore versus Board of Regents. I think, Sebastian, you're in the classroom, if memory serves. Yeah? Okay, there we are. I see you. Okay. I promise this will get smoother. All right, Sebastian, you want to go ahead and give me the facts, please, and Moore?
So Moore had cancer and leukemia, and the doctor told him that he must remove his spleen. And then I believe it was like 7 years the doctor recommended to keep coming back. However, the doctor was also taking cells and had some research for it.
Sebastian, let me just stop you there for a second. And by the way, if you could just speak up just a little bit more, just so we can all hear. I think I heard you, but it just was a little bit faint. Sebastian, let me ask this question. Why were more cells so valuable to UCLA?
They said there was something special about them that was not common.
Right. What was that special thing? Why were they special, Sebastian? Do you have it?
I'm seeing where it says it was a special cell, but I cannot see why specifically.
All right. Let me help you out. Okay, thanks, Sebastian. So again, I am not a scientist. I didn't go to med school. I went to law school for good reason, but I'll do my best to explain this to you in a competent fashion, as a professor ought to. We all have blood, right? If I cut myself, I'll bleed, and then eventually my finger will heal, right? My body generates new cells to take over where the old cells were. That's how biology works. But what happens if I take my blood outside my body, right? Generally, when you remove tissue and other things from your body, it dies, right? It stops reproducing. But there's some people who are special, like Mr. Moore. His cells continue to regenerate even after they removed from his body. So let's just make an example. Right? Let's say you take out 100 cells from Moore's body. You put those in a test tube. And, a month later, there are 1,000 cells. I'm just making up numbers here. Right? His original 100 cells kept reproducing to make 1,000 cells. Now, those 1,000 cells that were new were never in Moore's body. Again, the original cells were 100, but it made 1,000 new ones. This is why Moore cells were so valuable. You could take a little bit of his own cells, and they regenerate indefinitely, forever and ever and ever. They never stop. Why? We don't really know, right? We don't have a good sense of why he has such magical cells, but he does. He has magical cells. And the doctors at UCLA realized they were valuable. The second they took his blood from the first draw, they recognized that the the cells would reproduce indefinitely. Okay. Sydney, are you here, Sydney?
Yes, I'm on Zoom.
Oh, you're on Zoom. Thank you. Sydney, did the doctors at UCLA ever tell Mr. Moore about this problem?
No, I don't think they ever told him his cells were unique, but I think at one point they did say that his cells were being used for research. But that was later on.
Okay. Was there a consent form involved in this case?
Yes.
And what did that consent form say, Sydney?
I just wrote down that he consented to having his spleen removed and treatment that involved more cell collection. So I would assume he consented to having his cells removed, but not to commercializing them.
Yes. Okay, good. So there was nothing in the form about the cells being sold for commercial value. Okay, very good. All right. Thank you, Sydney. All right. So what we have here are two different torts, right? The first tort, I don't really care about. That's not why we're in class. The first tort is known as the breach of fiduciary trust. And what's fiduciary mean? When you have a relationship between a professional and a customer, there's a special type of bond, right? When you're an attorney and you have a client, you have what's called a fiduciary relationship. You have to act in the client's best interest. You have to disclose any problems to the client. You can't cheat them. When you're a doctor and you have a patient, there's a fiduciary relationship. The doctor has a duty to help the patient to improve his health, but also to disclose any possible conflicts of interest, right? You have to disclose, if you're going to be perhaps taking advantage of the patient. And here, Gold did not do that. For 7 years, he kept taking blood from Mr. Moore and never told him why. And he just said, oh, yeah, come on back. Come for a checkup. And he was basically ripping him off and taking all his blood. Right? Like Dracula, I have your blood, right? But it was done for commercial purposes. So that part, all the justices agreed there was a breach of fiduciary trust. But that's not the tort I care about. I care about the tort of conversion. Okay, so Luis, help us out. Think back to 1L, first semester. What is conversion? Sorry, I know you get cold sweats when you have those sorts of questions.
So conversion is when one asserts dominion over another's chattel and essentially it doesn't allow them to use it, or it blocks access to it. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Luis. Why is conversion such a hard issue in this case?
And in this case, the main issue of why it's kind of like, well, ultimately the court decides, something else different, but it's because they're trying to discuss if your body parts, or in this case, his cells, are actually something that he owns. Like, are they his chattel, or does he have property rights over his cells or not? That's the big main.
So again, Luis, let's just put the question plainly. Who owns the cells?
So from reading the case, when the cells are in his body, he does, but once they leave his body, they're essentially not his anymore.
All right. Thanks, Luis. Appreciate that. All right. So the question in this case is conversion, right? But in order to have the tort of conversion, you have to own the property. Who owns the cells? When the cells are inside of his body, there's no question they're his, right? If I were to walk up to one of you, take a scalpel, slice you open, and extract some of your cells, okay, I'm probably going to jail for attempted murder, among other things, but I think I'd be liable for conversion tort, right? I took your blood, I took your cells. No question about that, right? Battery, whatever tort you want to throw on, I did that. But what happens if you go to a hospital for a procedure and they take out your spleen? By the way, his spleen, a spleen is a organ that filters blood. It's not a very known organ, but it's a very important organ. Usually a spleen weighs 1 pound. His spleen was 22 pounds. It was huge. I don't know if it was this big, but it was pretty big. And that's why they had to take it out. So, they took out this was a life-saving procedure. They were doing a very good service for him. But they had other motivations, right? They had other motivations. After the spleen was taken out of his body, did he still have an interest in the spleen? Okay, that's one question. But another question is, once you take the spleen cells and you develop them, they create new cells and new cells and new cells indefinitely. So even if the spleen was his after it was taken out of the body, what happens to the cells created by the spleen at that point? All right, so Lance, you here, Lance? Okay, I see you waving your hand. Thank you. So, Lance, let me ask this question. How does the court go about answering the question of is there property in cells outside your body? How does the court go about answering this question?
Just remember that they allowed him to have the conversion thing, but not the patent, because it wasn't the actual physical property itself. Is something that you gain from learning from it.
Well, I think you're answering like 3 questions too deep. My question is one of process. Was there any statute that governed this question about conversion for cells, Lance?
I don't think they had any sort of relevant cases or anything of that sort.
So was this a case in first impression?
Yeah.
All right, so that's my question then. How should a court decide a case of first impression?
With great care.
With great care. Okay, you're funny. I like that. How did okay, smart answer. Let me try it again, Lance. How should the court in this case decide this case first impression?
One way the future cases that would go through with this, like what would be the people who would get taken advantage of, and or
health benefit to society.
All right, Grayson, you here?
Yeah.
Okay, are you also you're also in that room? Okay, good, perfect. Grayson, how did the court go about deciding this case of first impression?
You say that one more time. How did the state what?
How did the court go about deciding this case of first impression? What did the court look at?
I mean, I think that they assessed whether he had an interest in the cells.
I thought you're giving me the answer. I'm asking how. What did they do? This should not be a hard question.
I'm not sure.
Did you read the case?
Yep.
Quinny, you here? Yes, Quinny, go ahead.
How did they decide it?
Yes. What did they look at? What was their reasoning? How did they go about deciding this issue? I don't want just a holding on how they got there.
They looked at like how it would affect like public policy.
Okay, good. Let's talk about that. Let's just say Moore was correct and you could have the conversion tort for these cells. How would that theory of conversion affect public policy?
They said, like, they kind of mentioned about like how it would affect like medical research.
How would it affect medical research?
Because if people had the ability to like say whether or not they could use their cells or body parts or whatever, it could like hinder medical research because a lot of people could say no, and then therefore they would be able to use, like if Moore would have said no in this situation, since he has such like a rare like cell thing, it would hinder the medical research for, you know, like whatever, treatments for like other purposes.
Okay. So Quinn, let me just repeat what you just said. If Moore was correct and you could impose conversion is a strict liability tort, right? If you can impose conversion on these cells, how would that affect the amount of money people put into researching these cells, Quinny?
It would affect everyone that basically had a hand in like his cell because, like you said, it's strict liability. But then it's like a lot of those people may not have known.
Right.
He didn't give permission to like not use those cells.
So would pharmaceutical companies risk investigating these cell lines if they could have to pay a multi-billion-dollar fee later?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
I'm sorry. Would pharmaceutical companies risk investing money in these cell lines and doing all this research if they can be hit with a huge bill later from one of these donors? Okay, very good. Grayson, did I not call on you? I'm sorry. I think I screwed up before.
No, you did, but she did a good job of answering the question.
Okay, was your hand up?
It was, but she ended up answering the question.
Okay, well, that's okay. Thanks, Grayson. All right. Okay, Rhea, are you here? Okay, Rhea. So the majority focuses on this public policy consideration that if we want to reward and create incentives for research, we should not create this conversion tort. What case have we studied where that was a sort of reasoning that was used? That should be familiar, that we want to adopt a rule that creates incentives. What case maybe comes to mind for that rule?
Incentives?
Yeah. Case.
Let's see.
We haven't done that many, only about half a dozen so far.
Create incentives, maybe Pearson.
Okay, tell me why Pearson.
Because if you create a rule that anyone can just come in and do the hunt, then the original people who were actually in the practice of doing the hunt will want to do it if anyone can just come in and do it.
So which rule would promote the hunt?
The hunt would be the rule of capture. No, it would be the lock labor theory.
Good. Okay, so good. Very excellent, Rhea. Very good. So, Rhea, let me just ask one more follow-up. Does the majority seem to, or let me ask the question for you. How does labor theory work into the majority's opinion?
Well, if you take the majority opinion, which is kind of going against Moore's point. It would kind of be like the researchers who are putting in this work into looking into cells and kind of furthering it, maybe for better medical research and better uses for the future, then you should reward them instead of the person that kind of.
Excellent. Perfect answer. Thank you, Rhea. Very good. She's right. The majority is relying on lock labor theory. It doesn't say so exactly, but speaks about encouraging labor, encouraging research, encouraging incentives, right? It wants to adopt a rule that promotes research because people will live. People's lives will be saved because of this research, right? So it encourages a rule. Now, this rule is not very fair to Mr. What's his face, Mr. Moore, right? Is Ray here? Ray W? Yep, go ahead, Ray. Let me just take you off mute. 1 second. Ray, this doesn't seem very fair for Mr. Moore here. We have a dissenting opinion by Justice Mosk. What policy considerations does Justice Mosk adopt? Oh, I think now it's back on mute. Okay, go ahead.
I believe that she brought up fundamental fairness.
Okay, I think it's he, not a she, but so he brought up fundamental fairness. What does that mean?
Well, I forgot.
What does fundamental fairness mean? You just said it. It's got to mean something.
I mean, it's fair.
Say it without saying fair, right? Try to define it without using the word.
Okay, so there are it's equally proportioned, that it's the same for everybody.
What's unfair about this setup between Dr. Gold and Moore? Why is it fundamentally unfair?
I guess because of the reason that it's like his property initially, and it was obtained through, misrepresentation.
Well, Ray, so who's profiting here?
The pharmaceutical companies.
Well, it's a university, right?
I thought Sandoz Laboratories was the
right, but the university is a primary defendant, right? So the university is profiting. Who's not profiting?
More. Maybe the initial doctor.
Right. Okay, so let me ask a follow-up question, Ray. Who did all the hard work here?
Well, the initial doctor did a lot of hard work, and then I guess obtaining the samples, and then the researchers then were able to do more hard work and more.
Did Moore do any work here?
No.
So why should he profit?
Because property, there's basically different theories of property and how you acquire it. Some people think it's the work, I guess, and then some believe in an innate right to something that you own.
Very good. Exactly right. Do you take a labor theory approach? Do you take a property-based approach? Luis, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just had a quick comment. I agree with what was said, but couldn't you argue but for my existence, but for my cells, you wouldn't have gotten this research and all these great opportunities? I know it's something crazy, but could you make something out of that just to kind of help him, or is that kind of irrelevant and just crazy?
Well, it's almost like a tort standard, right? But for my cells, you'd never have done it. Patent law, which is referenced in the reading, suggests the answer is no. Right? Stuff you merely find in nature cannot be patented. It's only stuff that you mix your labor with, that you put creativity and ingenuity and thought into. So it's true that Moore cells are the basic building block, right? Without Moore, there wouldn't be any of this stuff. But also, he did nothing. I understand he did nothing, but he didn't contribute to the development of the cell line.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I think Lacey, was your hand up a minute ago?
It was. I was kind of along the same lines as what Luis was saying. It seems to me like even if you wanted to go and look at the labor theory of it, he may not have put as much into it, but he had to go to the hospital for 7 years and donate his blood, give his blood. He had to pay the medical expenses of seeing that doctor every however often for 7 years. And I'm reading the case thinking how much of that was really necessary for his treatment and how much of that was the doctor still trying to get more cells from him. So even looking at the labor theory, he did have to do something.
Yeah. And let me just give you some more facts. This is not in the book, but I've done some outside research in the case. After a while, Moore started saying, why do I have to go to UCLA? Why can't I do a checkup where he lives in Seattle? So then Dr. Moore started paying for, Dr. Gold started paying for Moore's plane tickets. And then he started putting up at a fancy hotel, the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, very, very fancy hotel. And they got to the point where Miss Moore was like, wait a minute, something's up. Every time he went for a checkup, he had to sign a form saying, yes, you can use my cells. And then one time he didn't check the box. He said, no, I do not consent. And the doctor flipped out. He's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And Moore's like, oh, whoops, I checked the wrong box by mistake. And he went back to Seattle. And he started getting all these nasty letters from the doctor saying, please sign it, please sign it, please sign it. At that point, he had a lawyer, right? He realized that something was up, and then they figured out what's going on. All right, very good. All right, so let me just summarize what we've gone so far. There are some policy arguments on both sides here that I think you should be aware of, right? One is what the majority favors, which is you want to reward labor. You want to reward creativity. You want to reward the doctors who put all this work into this creation, this innovation, right? But you also have the other side, which is that people should have the right to their own bodies. And people should not be able to profit off of what's in my body without my permission. There's also the fundamental fairness issue, right? How can it be that everyone's making money here but Mr. Moore, right? Everyone's making millions and billions and millions of dollars except for Mr. Moore. How is that fair? All right. We do have this breach of fiduciary duty tort, which is, it's not nothing, but the damages for that tort are limited. The damage to that tort would not be the value of the cell line, but merely the damage for not disclosing this information. So really, this would not make them whole, not even close. It would just cover the fact that the doctor lied. Any questions so far? Yes, Alyssa, go ahead.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask about the difference in damages between the different causes of action that he brought, but I was reading and he brought a lot more causes of actions than just conversion and the breach of fiduciary duty, whatever. What about the fraud? What about how would damages proceed with if he succeeded on the fraud issue?
The court only considered conversion. They didn't, and the fiduciary duty tort. I don't know how much damages there will be for fraud. I don't even know if you could make a claim for fraud. I think the closest you get is a fiduciary duty, right? Fraud usually requires affirmative misrepresentation, right? You lie. It's not clear that the doctor actually lied about anything. He simply just kept quiet, right? It's malfeasance versus nonfeasance, if you remember the distinction, right? So I don't think he engaged in malfeasance. I think he engaged in nonfeasance. So I don't think you can have a fraud claim. The fiduciary duty tort works more strongly because it imposes extra responsibilities to disclose stuff. And if you fail to disclose it, you breach that duty. Does that make sense?
I don't remember, but are punitive damages available for breach of fiduciary duty?
I doubt it. I think you're getting very nominal damage. I think it's not going to be very much.
And this is still good law, this case?
Well, let me ask a question based on Alyssa's question, right? Linda, you here? Yes, Linda. Let me ask you a question based on Alyssa's question. Were there any statutes that governed this dispute? I'm sorry. I think you're on mute, Alyssa. Linda, I'm sorry. Where'd you go? Yep, I think you're still on mute. Maybe I'll take out your earbuds. You there?
Okay. Can hear you now.
Yeah. Now we can hear you. Had California legislated on this issue? Had there been any laws passed by the statute governing this issue, Linda?
Okay, wait, I'm so sorry. My headphones just cut out. What did you say?
Let's try this again. Were there any statutes governing this issue in California that decided who owned these cells?
I don't believe there was a statute at that time. Well, no, there was. Excuse me. Sorry. They did have a statute that drastically is limiting a patient's control over the removed cells.
What did that statute do?
It said that the cells can be used for research, but if they're not used for research, they must be discarded.
Okay, right. So the law said that if a cell is removed from your body, it has to be burned or buried. But my question is a little bit different. Did that law provide compensation for the person whose cells are removed, or say what happens to the person whose cells are removed?
I don't believe so. I took that to mean that the plaintiff is not retaining the property rights.
Okay, you're right, but my question is different. At the time, the legislature hadn't decided this question, right? So Alyssa asks, is this case still good law? My question is this: which branch of government should be responsible for deciding this issue? The legislature or the courts? There's a big debate between the majority and the dissent on this question.
I would say the legislature, because they have to take the public as a whole when considering their decision, whereupon the judges, it's more focused on the case in front of them and how it's going to affect the whole.
Can the courts take a poll like in the Splunkian case?
No, they can't.
Why not? All right. Thanks, Linda. So the answer to your question, Alyssa, which I tried to get at is this case still good law? I am not aware that California has actually enacted any statute that would have replaced this common law decision. So as far as I know, the tort of conversion still is not applicable in this context. Does that answer your question, Alyssa?
Yes, it does.
Do you have another question?
Why? Yes, I do.
Go for it. And then Lance next.
What?
And Lance after you. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. It's a hypothetical that I'm not even quite sure makes sense, but I was just thinking about, like, what if there are certain types of research that someone as an individual disagrees with in terms of what their moral beliefs are, like embryonic stem cell research, for example. I don't know if there's any way that, like, I don't know much about it, so I don't know if there's like someone can take a grown person's cells and use that. But like, what if this person who disagrees with embryonic stem cell research has their cells taken and used for exactly that purpose? Does that person have any say in? I'm guessing the answer is no.
Well, you can opt out and you can say, I don't want my cells to be used, but then you don't get any money for it. Right. So I think the upshot of this case, if I can summarize a bit, is you can opt out. You can say, I do not want my cells to be used. But then if you opt out, there's no money. But if you opt in, say, yes, you can use my cells, there's no requirement to pay you for it.
Wait, I thought that the statute said that they could use it for research.
But under the informed the informed consent form, you can say, I do not consent, and they'll just destroy your cells. They won't research on them.
Oh, got you. All right, problem solved. Thanks.
All right, Lance, go ahead. I think you're in the classroom, so I'll unmute the classroom computer.
So is a lot of omission not considered when concerning the cause of action for fraud?
Well, usually fraud is an affirmative misrepresentation. If you just fail to mention something, that's usually not going to be enough for fraud, at least at common law. We'll do more of this in property too. Maybe you'll have someone else, not me. But for example, let's say you have a leaky roof on your house, and you know it's there. You just don't say anything. Can you be sued for a fraudulent misrepresentation? The answer is no, because you said nothing. But if the buyer says, "Hey, is there a problem with the roof?" You say, "No, the roof is good. The roof is good." Then they can sue you for fraud. Right? You have to have an affirmative misrepresentation. All right. All right. Thank you, Lance. All right. Let me wrap up a bit this case. The court first holds that there's really no cases here, right? There's a case of first impression. And because there's a case of first impression, the court is hesitant to extend this doctrine to this new area. The court suggests that the statutory law in California treats these cells as waste. That's not a property right that you have. So he's more comfortable reaching this result. Also, Moore wasn't merely asserting a property interest in the cells that were taken from his body, but also the cells created from those cells, which he had no role in creating, other than the fact they were his. So the court rejects it. The dissent vigorously disagrees. He says we have a case here. We should not just abdicate a responsibility. We should be able to decide it in a common law context. And it's fundamentally unfair that everyone here profits except for Mr. Moore. Okay, and please be sure the case summary for this case is helpful. It's in the class folder. Definitely take a look at this case summary later. All right. Any other questions so far? Yeah, so Javon, go ahead. Oh, I got to unmute the class. Okay, I got you. 1 second. Go ahead.
Yeah, I disagreed with the majority opinion because it just seems like they are like advocating to exploitation, basically. Because it seems like they exploited Mr. Moore. Because everyone, like you said, everyone profited off of him except for him. And the dissent made a point that really struck with me was when the dissent brought up the idea of the bundle of rights and how, like, you know, different property rights, different, you know, properties, you have different rights. You can just do anything because it's your property. And they made a good point that this would have been a good time to use, you know, that the types of rights you can have when you come into an instance like this. And it just seems like like policy wise, they're more okay with exploiting somebody at their risk, at the perceived risk of you know, harming the pharmaceutical industry.
All right, very good, very good. Thank you for that. I have a clip I want to play in a minute that I think will help Javon's point. Did anyone else have any comments on this before I get to the clip? All right, thanks, Javon. Did anyone ever read the book or watch the movie The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks? The book came out about a decade ago, and HBO had a movie maybe 2-3 years ago. Oprah Winfrey stars in the movie. I'm going to play a clip in a minute, but let me just set it up. In the 1950s, there was a black woman in Baltimore named Henrietta Lacks. She was she had cancer, and she went to Johns Hopkins University for treatment in Baltimore. And when they did work on Henrietta, they discovered that she had these magical cells, that her cells would live outside her body and reproduce forever. So similar to Mr. Moore. Very few people have this. Now, they never told Henrietta why they were taking her cells. And they never told her family for years. And they made billions of dollars off of her cell line. So the setup for this movie, which I'm going to play a clip from soon, is that there's a journalist named Rebecca Skloot. And she is writing a book about Henrietta Lacks. And she's talking to the Lacks family in Baltimore. And I think this clip, I think, helps to reinforce Javon's point about exploitation. So it's about 3 minutes. Just play it, and I'll come back in a bit. Okay. And this is on HBO if you have HBO Max, which is I think, well worth the money.
Take time, man. You like the way she decorated now? Hey, Miss Rebecca.
Sammy.
This is our father.
Nice to meet you.
Ma'am. Lawrence, this after 2 o'clock, you just take a Barbara morning coffee? Miss Rebecca, you better run while you can. Pay him no mind. Pops, did you know Mom Michelle's gonna make Stevie Wonder see? Don't surprise me none.
They're not actually being put into people's eyes, her cells, but
Hey, Pop, this Rebecca wanna know everything Dale always asking about.
I'm writing a book about Henrietta, but what I'm missing is information about her and her life, what she liked to do. She was born in Roanoke.
That's right. Raised in Clover. Didn't like Baltimore much. So every summer she'd get on down to Clover, all herself, tending a little tobacco. Stringing, even after she got sick.
Wow. And when did you first hear about your wife's cells? And
Hopkins called, said, come on up there because she died. They want to do an autopsy. They said, help your children in case they come down with cancer. When I went to claim the body, none of them doctors told me nothing about keeping her alive in them tubes.
What you expect? I wouldn't go to Hopkins to get my toenails cut. Remember when we were little? If you were bad, the old folks would threaten to put you out so them Hopkins night nurses could get you.
I remember.
Hopkins was known for snatching black folks, experimenting on them.
You'd be surprised how many people disappeared in these Baltimore.
You snatch him right off the street.
Well, it might be a myth. You never know.
You know what is a myth? Everyone's saying Henrietta Lacks donated themselves. She didn't donate nothing. They took them and didn't ask.
well, that is to me the story and why it needs to be told.
If this is something that's going to help mankind, I can't imagine someone not wanting to help but be forthright. Inform the family.
Just show a little respect.
Drop a little note.
The postcard.
Something.
Hopkins said they gave themselves away, but they made millions.
A girlfriend of mine's brother-in-law worked in a lab over in D.C. She introduced us, and he said, Lax, that's funny. For years, I've been working with the cells of this woman who died of cervical cancer named Henrietta Lacks, and goes on to explain how anytime he wants more, all he has to do is order them from a supplier, like everybody else. Dave's got gangrene, toes need amputating. Sonny a bad heart, Lawrence high blood pressure, and Dale's got run herself into the ground over all the wrong that's been done. This family's the only ones have made a dime off of their own mother's cells.
All right, I'll stop the clip there. If you have HBO, you can watch. I'm sure it's on YouTube. You can find it also. It's an excellent movie. Very well done. Oprah Winfrey stars in it. She's fantastic in the movie. But I think that scene captures the more concept quite well. You have the family that doesn't even know about this is not making a penny off of it, and everyone else is. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Questions on the movie or on the class in general? All right, I'm out of time. Let me briefly wrap up. I'm going to put the minute poll on. If you have any questions, you can put them there as well. But this concept of property in your body is very difficult, and it relies on policy considerations. It relies on morality. It relies on tough questions about what the state should have the power to control over you. This case implicates when the court should intervene versus the legislature. And there's really no easy answer. I think we had a pretty robust discussion today, which shows how hard these issues are. And I thank you for a very good discussion. Anything on your minds? All right, I'll have office hours, same around 2:45. You have the link. If not, I will see you on Wednesday. Thank you very much.
You have the minute poll up?
Yep, it's running. Yeah. Okay. If you're not seeing it, there might be something with your app, but I have already 5 people put it in, so it's available. All right, thank you, everybody.